It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new episode of Oh God, What Now, the original No Bullshit Politics podcast. I'm Andrew Harrison, and thanks to everybody who came to our live show at the Tabernacle in West London last week, and everybody who watched it on Zoom, and everybody who watched the YouTube stream as well. It was a fantastic once-in-a-lifetime experience, and we're really grateful to everybody who helped out, spread the word, and donated on the night. It was a fantastic experience, and we'd love to do it again, but we'd hate to have to do it again. Meanwhile, the work of change must begin immediately. And no, we're not changing the name of the podcast again, but our Twitter account still exists, unlike the Conservative parties. On our first edition for Labour's New Age, Hail to the Keith. What's top of the in tray in Starmer's new cabinet? Was Labour's victory really broad but shallow, as the Tory press and the anti-Labour left insist? And if so, what can Starmer do to make Britain love Labour? Plus, France rejects the far right in a shock election result, but who ends up with the power in a suddenly chaotic system? And should we worry about Mélenchon as much as we would Le Pen and Jordan Bardella? Let's meet the panel. Marie Leconte is a political journalist, author, and extremely happy French person today. Hello, and phew, Marie.
Hello, phew to you.
You look like a great weight has been lifted from your shoulders.
Jesus Christ, yes.
We can come to this later and in much more detail, but what's your one-off super tight hot take that the average clueless roast beef, me, should know?
Oh, once again, left-wing French voters have saved the Republic for the fourth time in 25 years.
If they do it a fifth time, do they get to keep it?
I hope so.
Right, okay. I have another question for you as a deep politics insider. Have you yet detected the identity of the Tory MP who on the first day back with the new compliment said, "It feels like we're Slytherins in a Hogwarts full of Hufflepuffs"?
It made me murderous, is the first thing I have to say. No, the second one, it's such a plague. And as someone who is of that exact generation who grew up with Harry Potter, that is the problem with, I think, my people having reached political life. Where, I guess the difference that I've actually read, a number of books since reading Harry Potter. I believe this person has not just got stuck at around 11. But that feels like such a kind of like elder mid-millennial kind of thing to say, which I hate.
But it does raise the bizarre thought that the Conservatives have an MP under 35. Is this possible?
Their one voter under 35 happens to be a member of Parliament.
We'll be doing more on France later in the show. Also with us, comedian, YouTube sensation, and a man desperately scrolling through videos of Labour's new cast of characters to get the voice. It's Matt Green. How you doing, Matt?
I'm all right. How are you?
No, I'm not bad. That was a very enjoyable live show, wasn't it?
It was. It was really fun, and it was a real pleasure to meet all of our lovely audience and to do Jeffrey live for probably the last time, certainly under a Tory government. For sure. Although there was, I don't know about you, there was definitely a tiny voice in my head, particularly when I was doing the thing at about 9:30, thinking, if these results don't go the way we're expecting, this is going to be the most embarrassing thing I've ever done in my life. Effectively doing a victory lap before the victory. But luckily, everything was fine.
I think everybody in the room had a slight fear that, it's obviously all logic and reason said we know which way this is going. But logic and reason does not come into it when you're kind of at the, James O'Brien, his face was just white the whole time.
Yeah, he just genuinely, he seemed stressed all night until that point. He genuinely couldn't believe it.
He was like, when you poke a sea anemone and it goes back into its little hole. Yeah. He was like that the whole time. Who is standing out from the Labour team so far as comedy gold? Have you spotted anybody?
I suppose my main response to questions like that is give it a minute. Give me a second. I haven't been enraged sufficiently by anything that's happened on the Labour side to do anything about it. I'm sure something will happen. I think Darren Jones feels like someone who I'm going to have fun with because he's quite, he's a good performer, but he's quite happy to sort of say stuff on screen that I think as an opposition spokesperson, people go, oh, that's fun. He's having fun with it. But I suspect as the government person, people might start going, hang on, that's a little bit too glib or something. So I think he's someone I'm sort of interested in. But it's mostly been the media response has been interesting. Laura Kunsberg's sort of infamous now thing she said to Ed Davey of congratulations, I suppose. Which, it was probably just, a throwaway remark, but it kind of felt like she was going, oh, I don't have any of my friends anymore. You've ruined it a bit. So, and also the thing basically everyone, it feels like everyone's still going on about the next election as though they can't let go of the fact we've had. It's like we need one more day of campaigning.
Yeah, it's a bit like, at the end of the First World War, somebody going, well, of course, when the cavalry gets itself get back together, we get to do some proper charges. It doesn't work that way anymore.
Yeah.
My favourite comedy moment of the weekend was a Secret Tory guy, Henry, saying, it's all well and good putting the guy from Timson's in charge of prisons, but do you think it's a good idea to have a guy who cuts keys for a living in charge of the prison system? Completing the panel, it's writer, commentator, actor, tinker, tailor, soldier and spy, Alex Andreou. Hello, how are you doing, Alex?
I'm all right, Andrew.
I'm
quite
afraid
mellow.
Oh, glad to hear it. I'm afraid we're going to bring it down completely because you're going to have to field the Joe Biden question.
Oh, must I?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. It's got to be done. By today, this afternoon, Monday, 4 more congressmen had insisted that Biden step aside. This is widely agreed to be the week that a decision is going to have to be made. What happens if Kamala Harris is the Democrat candidate, or is it too late and either go with Biden or lose?
I don't know. So this was a Zoom call, apparently, where people were piping up, and there were a number of them who have concerns about Biden, and 4 of them explicitly said that he should step aside, although the identity of the 4th one is unknown, which is quite weird. So they know 3 for sure, but the 4th one is one of 2 people.
Was it a Zoom thing where he just put the wrong cartoon face on?
Well,
it's a rabbit. Yeah.
It was a Zoom thing that maybe they had it like on a 3-portrait gallery. Yeah. So if more than 3 people have the one of them doesn't show up, and I don't know. I don't know what's going. Anyway, I think it's fair to say that there are plenty of people within the Democratic Party that think Biden going to election will be a disaster. I think they're right to think that, by the way. I'm a big fan of Biden. I think he's been exceptionally effective as a president and really hasn't had much credit for it. But his performance in the debate the other day meant that any focus group you look at, people were really worried about security stuff. And that's not something that you can get over or around. So he will have to go. Now, who takes over is quite complicated because apparently only Kamala Harris, if she took over, only she would get to keep the hundreds of millions worth of donations that they've already had to the Biden-Harris campaign. Anyone else would have no claim on that money.
They'd have to start again.
They'd have to start fundraising again, which is quite a big thing. My vote for a long time has gone to Pete Buttigieg, simply because I think if we are in that space where the object of the game is to basically upset your opponents as much as possible, then this clean-cut, quite small C conservative former serviceman, gay Democrat, I think he makes Trump's head explode. I think he would have the most difficulty with him.
Would pay to watch that. It's week 1 of the Age of Starmerism, and as promised, the new cabinet has started industriously. House building targets are back. Bridget Phillipson wants 6,500 new teachers. Lammy is trying to reset the relationship with the EU. It's all go. So how is the morning after the fight before going? Is all that euphoria melting away in the cold light of what needs to be done? Before we get into that, though, we have to, just for posterity, round up the panel's favourite bits of the past 4 days. I think mine was, it's a tie between Liz Truss's does not compute face when she lost, when it just looked like sparks were going to start flying out of her ears.
But that's Liz Truss's face.
I know, that's it. That
to
is
anything.
Yeah. It's either that or it's Akshata Murthy hovering behind Sunak like the ghost of something or other, and she appears to be wearing the carpet from the Overlook Hotel. Marie.
So this is going to be quite niche and didn't last for long. And also I'm actually quite critical of the BBC's all-nighter coverage on election night. But one thing I really enjoyed, which made no sense, was the Richard Halden sad cam. For about 2 hours, they would just cut randomly, not to important speeches or declarations, but just for some reason, 15 seconds of Richard Halden in Essex, sad, alone. And they did it at least 5 or 6 times, and it was really, really weird. It was just him being sad by himself. And yeah, I really enjoyed the Dick Halden sad cam.
Enter it for the Turner Prize. Alex, what about you?
So, I got my full list from the live, didn't I?
Yeah, you got to do it in the room, but there must be something...
No, I got my full wish list from the live. So I got Shaps and Keegan and Rees-Mogg, and I even got my reverse Portillo moment, which was Caroline Noakes keeping her seat. So I was I was pretty happy throughout the night. But I mean, the highlight for me has to be the sort of eye roll that Maitlis did at Dory's during the coverage. Maitlis has this extraordinary way of just making notes in an annoyed way or looking away in an annoyed way that basically says to the producer, why did you bring me this? What is this doing here? And she did that a couple of times with Nadine Dorries, and it was just delicious.
Yeah. Matt, how about you?
I've quite enjoyed Steve Baker. Like, I never wanted it anyway, so fuck you guys. It's been quite fun. And his Twitter bio, which I've just checked again, which he's changed to Rebel Commander, Government Tormentor in Chief, the General, Politician of the Year, Godfather of the Conservative Right, fighting for a free future. And some weird emoji at the end.
I really love the fact that this sounds like someone about to sell you Bitcoin.
Yeah, he totally does. And that thing of like, I fought to win, but I'm so glad I lost. And I think what I liked about it is that I just think that's quite an honest response, because I suspect there are quite a lot of ex-Tory MPs who feel like that, but wouldn't say it publicly because they still want a future.
Marcus Fish, for instance, we might come to him a bit later. Anyway, let's get into the serious stuff. Alex, the big event today has been Rachel Reeves' first statement as Chancellor. Bit of a barnstormer, the worst set of circumstances since the Second World War. Political self-interest was put ahead of the national interest. Is this her there's no money left letter moment where she stamps down the past and lays the blame for everything that's going to come on her predecessors?
No, that moment will come later this month. She has asked the Treasury to deliver an urgent assessment of UK finances before Parliament breaks. And I think that will be prepare for that to be skewed towards catastrophe, I think, so that her first budget can be a smidgen softer than that would imply, and she can look like a hero. I mean, that's what I would do if I were her or advising her. In other ways, I thought it was a very good speech. I thought it was a sort of along the same vein that has characterized everything they've done so far, which is action, 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 action. We're not for words, basically. I mean, there's a sense that everyone's exhausted, that the summer holidays are coming, and Labour is basically telling its people just keep going on adrenaline for another 4 weeks so we can get something started. Then we can go off for the holidays and have a bit of a rest while things are in process, if that makes sense, which is quite sensible.
Yeah, I mean, no alarms and no surprises has been the kind of the watchword. The onshore wind ban is over, which surprised me that would come in quite so quickly. I don't suppose it's possible to, if we can sort of like guess anything else that might be coming. But are you?
Something has occurred to Labour that does not appear to have occurred to Tory governments going back to at least 2016. That government has power to do stuff. That that it's not only there to announce things and put in some circumstances to allow it maybe at some point to happen. You know, they can do shit. And so this goes back to what I've been saying for a while now, that this particular last government seemed to think that just by announcing something, it had happened.
Yeah.
And this is basically the exact opposite. They understand that they can do stuff. They have levers. And one of them is call-in powers, for example, on planning.
Yeah.
Like, we want this stuff done, and if you don't approve it at local level, there is a chance we're going to take that power back and say it's happening anyway.
Yeah.
I think that will be a huge, huge unclogger of government machinery, and I'm here for it.
Matt, it's been quite interesting that Reeves has announced that they're going to be building these 1.5 million homes over the term on grey belt, which is not a phrase I'd heard before, but makes instant sense. And it's I think a fantastic coinage because, you know, anybody who has family in the allegedly beautiful verdant green belt knows there are really crappy parts of it, you know, sort of disused fields, car parks, wind-blasted former airfields. And I was amazed that nobody had come up with this before. The ugly green belt, the crap bits. Is it smart to take on the NIMBYs this way, do you think?
Yeah, and I like it. And also I like it because it sounds a bit like the grey vote. And it suggests that we're going to build on top of all the pensioners, which why not? They're not voting for Labour, so
triple lock. Yes.
But there is something in that you should put. I mean, I can't remember who it was I saw on over the weekend talking about this, saying, "Look, you've got a huge mandate. You can put things where people who don't vote for you don't want them because you don't have to worry about them for a bit." And that's a huge power that you have for a few months and couple of years in the first parliament,
Yeah.
Isn't that briefly as well, I think, one of the advantages of having won a massive majority? Because the people who didn't vote Labour this time and voted for the Conservatives will never vote Labour in their lives, no matter what they do. So you can just be like, 1 million houses in each of those constituencies.
On your house, on top of you.
Yeah.
Well, although it does run very counter to what Starmer's very first thing that he said was, which is, we will govern and serve everybody, especially if you didn't vote for us. That seems to be the watchword and the kind of the change of tone, service, self-dealing is in the past. So while it might be amusing to us to imagine, we're going to build gigantic tower blocks on Eastbourne or whatever, he's probably not going to do that, is he?
I mean, to be fair, he might. I've been pleasantly surprised by, as we've just talked about, the amount of stuff they've done already just in a few days. And I think, because listening to his first speech, I think it would have been quite hard to not be at least a bit cynical, because every prime minister will arrive and, stand in front of Downing Street and say, I want to, like everyone in this country, I will govern everyone, blah, 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 beyond party politics, etc., etc. And then they just do not do that. Whereas, there's stuff like the fact that they're bringing in Nick Boles, who was a Conservative minister, literally to do stuff on planning, I thought was really interesting. We'll talk about some of the Lords appointments in a bit, many of whom were not especially party political. And there's a bit like, you meant it? You said a thing.
Can I give you one
it.
stat on this?
Yeah.
So in order to fulfill their pledge, Labour need to build, on average, 300,000 homes a year for this parliament. The last time the UK has built 300,000 homes a year was in 1977. They haven't even come anywhere near that number since then. And if you look at the graph, basically what you get is a rump of house building that is private house building that's always round about 200,000. Bit below, bit above, but round about there. And then the rest of it pre-1977 was council housing. And that disappears suddenly. In the late 70s, it just disappears and we're down to 200,000. So there is no getting around this. The state has to take responsibility for building some social housing, either by investing or by stimulating or by offering incentives, but there's no getting around it. If you need that kind of housing per year, the state has to do its bit. We have like 60 years worth of data that prove it.
And it's quite impressive, the idea that it actually might do it. It might actually do what it does. And that's it. Something else I wanted to ask you about Murray, was Lammy meeting Canada's foreign minister, Melanie Joly, and in the most kind of convivial, in a way that sort of that had no sort of English exceptionalist bombast quotient at all. He was kind of like loving up Canada like he wouldn't believe. That felt quite different to me.
I do think David Lammy is very good, and I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. Actually, the piece is coming out in Foreign Policy magazine very soon. And he's a very interesting man. I think he made the point to me that he did the job of shadow foreign for a very long time. So I think he traveled to something like 42 countries in that time. So had the chance to make all those contacts before he even got elected. And even before that was always incredibly well connected. So famously, he's been friends with Obama for a very long time. He introduced Keir Starmer to Obama. Part of me wonders if that's why Keir offered him the job, because he kind of wanted an in with Barack. But no, I think that was an interesting pick, because again, he is someone who really knows the world. And if you speak to him as well, because his parents were Guyanese, that he spent a lot of time there. He really cares about the global south, like sincerely, and he talks about the fact that he feels his experience and his identity are anchored in, those parts of the world. And actually, he really wants to reconnect Britain a lot, not just to Europe, even though that's a massive part of it, or, the US, etc., but really make sure that the UK is doing its bit all across the world, which again, I think is not rhetoric we'd heard in a very long time, or it was always couched in that weird Brexit terms that felt a bit icky.
What did you make of the cabinet picks? Because the surprises really were kind of as we just mentioned, non-political experts, and no job for Emily Thornberry.
Yes, I think no one knows for certain what happened there. I think one of the theories is that she'd actually been quite dodgy on Israel stuff. So she'd said, yes, in the media, said that, lots of Israel's actions had been justified, including stuff that frankly was unjustifiable. And that's something that, and you compare that to the person who did end up getting her job and who's someone who's always been very strong on that. So I think that is the most likely explanation. The other one, and that's just me, but I think she is a bit of a loose cannon. So I think she is the person who you do really want in your shadow cabinet, because she'll do any kind of media interview and she'll be funny and she'll say stuff. So a bit like Matt was saying about Darren Jones earlier, she's someone who will get headlines, who doesn't care, etc. I'm not convinced that's someone you want in your, playing it safe and just doing stuff quite carefully government, but maybe that's not. I really like her personally, but I can sort of see the reasoning whereby she doesn't quite work in a Starmer government.
The fact that we love her, and we had her on the pod, maybe indicates why she. I don't think
Emily wanted AG. It's a really boring job. It's a very low profile, no press, dull job. If I were to offer a theory, it would be that she tried to get DCMS because Thangam Debonair had not been elected because she didn't really fancy AG, and that went basically slightly wrong.
I want to ask you as well, speaking on behalf of every single woman on earth, what do you make of Bridget Phillipson and Annalise Dodds as women and equality ministers?
I'm quite heartened by those appointments, which again, what a weird thing to say about
hate
equality
minister. You can't stand her. Famously can't abide her.
Oh yeah, no, always lose the gal. Yeah.
She's fanning herself in the studio here at the thought of Bridget Phillipson.
But no, I think they're both obviously feminist women who've campaigned on feminist issues for a long time. They've spoken up about LGBT issues. They're both, I think, women who've actually tried to get some heat of the trans debate, and I think they're both, and also again, they're just really not culture war-y kind of people and politicians. Like, you really can't accuse either of them to be a bit too flashy. And again, I say that with love, I like them both, but that they're not going to be the exciting, like, say something insane to a newspaper kind of people, which I think is probably what we need in that position at the moment, given, the number of incredibly contentious issues you're going to have to deal with in that brief.
Well, who are our favourite cabinet deep cuts? Matt, have you spotted anybody that you're quite glad to see there?
I don't know if I'd call it a deep cut, but I was happy that Lisa Nandy got DCMS, because I think of DCMS as like my sort of state department of, like, they're the ones who kind of, in an emergency, I have to go to them. They're the people in charge. And I've been impressed with her over the years. I think she's always come across well, been very thoughtful, good sense of humour. So she's in charge of comedy and art and culture and stuff. I'll go with that. I think that department has been a bit overlooked over the years sometimes, and it's good to have quite a big hitter, someone who was.
We had a culture secretary who was the most uncultured human on the face of the earth.
Yeah. The thing is, the fact that you could be referring to several people when you say that.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't even know who you're
Which
talking
one?
about.
Nadine. Yeah. Who's your favourite deep cut?
I say briefly on Lisa Nandy, I think another interesting thing is that obviously she famously cares about towns so much and about levelling up. And weirdly, I think that's really good for culture. Like, that is someone who'll be able to link up that interest in that brief. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's going to be, she's going to do the levelling up of culture that the Tories said they would do, but just didn't.
The first thing she said was something like, from rugby league to the Royal Ballet. And I thought that was a nice... Yes, those Royal Opera or whatever, that represents sort of London culture, and then rugby league, obviously Northern and sport, and I think it was it worked.
I would say mine is Alison McGovern at the DWP.
Okay.
I feel like I have to give her a shout out, because when I started in Westminster in 2015 and I was a kind of like baby political journalist, didn't know anyone, Ali got in touch and asked me if I wanted to go for a beer. And I was like, oh my God, I'd never even properly met an MP at that point, I think, apart from, talking to them via the job. And I was like, fine, God, like terrified. And we went for a drink, and actually she basically just said, you're new to this. Is there anything you'd like to ask? I feel like, we need more people who are not kind of like posh white men doing those jobs. So here to help if you need anything or find it all a bit intimidating, which I thought was an incredibly kind thing to do. And she never obviously asked for anything in return or anything. So I think that speaks incredibly well of her character. So I'm very glad to see that she's got a job. But even beyond that as well, I think she's someone who's been very quietly doing a lot in the Labour Party for a very long time. And it's a good thing that someone's finally gone, oh, yeah, she should probably be rewarded with something quite big.
My deep-ish cut is that Chris Bryant is getting both a ministerial role in the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, but he's also going to be a minister at DCMS. And Chris Bryant, we like. He doesn't take any shit. He's a forensic thinker. He's got a great sense of humour. I think he'll probably be quite good for the BBC, actually. He seems to be well aligned in that way. Alex, who do you fancy?
So mine is Diana Johnson going to Home Office.
Mm-hmm.
So Diana Johnson was the chair of the Home Affairs Committee for a while, and she knows that brief inside out. She really has been very impactful in the background, especially in Rand and stuff like that. At the time of recording, they still haven't allocated exact briefs within departments. We just know which department these people are going to. But I wouldn't be surprised if her brief was connected to immigration. She's an extremely empathetic person when it comes to immigration, very fair, and understands, I think, the difficulties of that particular brief, and the sort of the companion appointment is Stephen Timms to DWP, who was also the chair of the DWP committee in the Commons, and I like that pattern of like taking the person who was in charge of that committee for several years, who knows the issues, understands the brief, and saying, come and help us at the department. I think that speaks very well.
It's just so sensible.
Yeah.
I know. All of it is so sensible and yet so surprising after the last 14 years.
It'll never catch on. Alex, I want to ask you about Tony Blair's advice over the weekend. Tonti's back. Advice for Starmer. Apparently he's texting him all the time. But part of the advice was to call to bring back ID. New phone. Who this? He called for ID cards to return, making the case, not an entirely bad one, that it's a bit different now. The only game changer is the full embrace of the potential technology. He's punting ID cards as the solution to the immigration problem. Labour's rejected it. What did you make of Tonti's interventions?
I mean, in part his intervention is good advice. In part it is sort of an old bloke speaking generically about technology that in a way that's not really helpful and specific enough. I mean, I'm a big fan of ID cards. I was called an ID fascist by a liberal friend only last week because I come from a country that has them, and it's simply not the. No,
Matt, we're
to
in
be
trouble.
honest,
We're stuck with fascists in the room.
to be honest, the thing that makes me unsafe is, 25 different organizations having copies of various bills and bank statements of mine, kept not very securely on their computer system. That makes me feel a lot more unsafe than having one ID card. And I also think the people who often object to ID cards are the people who are never asked to prove their identity. As someone who gets asked to prove his identity and his right to be in this country all the time, to me, ID cards are like a superpower. It's like, this is who I am, definitively. So, I mean, he has a point, okay? ID cards, especially electronic ones, would be quite smart in the immigration context, because I think we are very bad at tracking people leaving. And so ID cards would make an instant impact on the figures, because they would boost the numbers of emigrating people. We're really rubbish. We genuinely have no idea how many people there are in this country.
Is it because people are tapping out?
Because no one keeps a record of people who are leaving. If someone has basically an indefinite permission to remain here, we count them as forever remaining here, when actually 2 years later they may have gone to another country. tree.
I think last year, a couple of years ago as well, where we found that the immigration figures are essentially, I mean, I'm exaggerating for comedy purposes, but only slightly, is basically one guy with a clicker at Heathrow. Just doing like in.
Yeah.
And that's what we base everything on. And it was like, heck, what? I'm sorry, what?
So, I mean, the core point is surely sensible, regardless of what your views are on immigration, regardless of what you think the ideal numbers of immigration are. Surely you want whatever the numbers are to be a result of deliberate policy rather than something that happens accidentally.
I mean, this does suggest that there's a possibility of the very funny situation of actually when we finally count how many immigrants are coming in and out, that there's far fewer than they thought, and that Reform's whole platform crumbles.
Yeah.
Which,
it's
worth a try.
35 million people
it's worth
in
a
the
try,
country.
isn't it? Like,
But also dump students from the total.
Yeah.
What madness is this? People who are coming here for a set period of time to basically just give us loads of cash, and we go, oh, big problem this.
Yeah. Marie, what do we make of this idea of the loveless landslide narrative that both the right and the kind of non-Labour anti-Starmer left are trying to get out there? That, it's the second largest Labour majority in terms of seats, but the vote share was 33.8%. Corbyn won 10.2 million votes. Starmer got 9.7 million. The idea that Johnson is trying to seed around the support is broad but shallow. What do we think?
I don't. So I'm not particularly concerned by the argument saying this is, undemocratic and whatever. Like, I don't really buy that. In that case, those people should have campaigned for a different kind of voting system many years ago, especially voted in the referendum when there was a referendum in this country on this. But on the more political side, I do find it quite interesting because I think the reason why we saw the results in 2019 then 2024 is because the Tories' base was very wide but very shallow, right? Because I think the problem is if as a party your vote is very efficient, that means that if you lose even a little bit in percentage points, you kind of lose everywhere. And so I think that's something Starmer should be wary of. Obviously, I'm not too concerned about it, but I do have one worry, which is that we're going to have 5 years of Starmer does a thing and then pollsters and newspapers go, well, if they do that thing, then they're going to lose 7 seats straight away. They're going to be able to be like, well, that goes. So if Labour can hold their nerve, and also just realise that, make peace with the fact very early on that they are definitely going to lose quite a lot of seats at the next election, probably still win an election. Again, they have such a majority, it's fine. Like, as long as they're in the mindset of we can afford to lose people, it's fine. My only worry is that they will just go, oh God, every time something happens. But again, with a base that wide, you're going to lose people, whatever you do.
Yeah, but also it seems to plug in as well to, like we mentioned earlier, the idea that everybody to the right of the Labour Party is still in 2016, 2017. They're still trying to fight a battle that just doesn't exist anymore, that you can be sort of talking in terms of this poll and, what's happening with the Red Wall? That's all the past. There's a vast majority and a vast amount of political capital. And even if some of it gets burnt away at the next election, there's still a lot there.
They're so far ahead, in sort of sporting terms. They're like a lap ahead at the moment. So they can afford to take a few brickbats and afford to lose a bit of time, to carry on the metaphor, by doing stuff that I don't think people realise. And I think it'll take a long time for that to really filter through, because it's not even... Because an 80-seat majority was a big majority, but it got knocked down quite quickly by-elections and all sorts of things. And it got quickly into a point where you thought, oh, actually, it's a working majority, but it's not invulnerable. Whereas 170, there's nothing that can happen that can knock that down to even slightly.
No, they've got 5 years. Basically.
Yeah, they absolutely have to.
5 years.
Yeah. Alex, finally, we should just check in with the Tories. Are you okay, guys? It was the worst result in their history, record lows across the board. I particularly liked Marcus Fish saying the party ought to be dissolved. Just like end it and rip it up and start again. Keir Starmer likes orange juice, doesn't he? The dust is settling. Are you getting any sense, Alex, that they're entering real reflection? Because they seem to have thrown themselves straight into what they're comfortable with, which is leadership battles, left versus right. Who owns two? So there's no sort of pulling back to look at the big picture of where they are.
It's irrelevant in many, many ways because their single biggest failure, I think, seeing what has happened in the last 6-7 years, has been to change the system via which they select their leader, which has failed them again and again and again and again. So it's the same selectorate that will choose the leader. So we know the result ahead of time. They will choose the most right-wing, the weirdest, the least attractive to the electorate leader possible, because it will be the same group of people that looked at Liz Truss and thought she was a good idea. They will be selecting the leader of the opposition, and we'll just have to lump that dysfunction because it's now too late for them to change the rules.
And I hope they do the same, make the same mistake that Labour made in 2010, which is go off and spend ages doing that and leaving the field, in that case, to the Tories to build the narrative. It was all Labour's fault. They crashed, they ruined the economy, and we're going to have to do austerity. And I think Labour can do the opposite of that. And they're already doing that, already starting that process.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to whoever the new Michael Howard and whoever the new IDS is. Can be very entertaining. Meanwhile, there are other events taking place in the world apart from what we need never again refer to as the Jenny Lex. And we're going to approach them by the medium of heroes and villains. Who is the Count Binface of the week so far? And who is the Right Honourable Frogface of Clacton? And will Alex finally win one of his nominations?
No, of course not.
It's a new government. It could happen.
He's
It might
judging
happen.
it. He's
It's a new
judging
day.
it. No,
It's a new
no.
world. It's a world of service, Alex. Matt,
Yes. Hello.
who's your hero and who's your villain?
Well, I've got a sort of silly one and a serious one. So my silly one is the hero. I read an interview with Sandy Toksvig this week, and she's my hero because she revealed that she left Bake Off because it was affecting her mental health because she couldn't make herself care about baking. Which I thought was brilliant. I mean, that's not a direct quote, but essentially the quote was she spent all this time in these kitchens watching cakes slowly rising and was ringing her wife going, I can't deal with this. It's too boring. And I just thought, yes, finally someone has admitted something that I've thought for years, which I don't understand the appeal of it. I'm very happy for other people to enjoy it, but I don't get it. And people, spending this, and the idea that someone behind the scenes was just slowly going mad, going, why are we doing this, guys?
Sandy Toksvig turns up at work and it's fucking cake again.
What is it? We're doing baking again.
Oh my Christ. They're for eating, not looking at. Who's your villain?
My villain, to switch tones awkwardly, is Viktor Orban. Because he also turned down presenting Bake Off. Well, I mean, he's on this weird sort of quixotic one-man peace mission thing where he's going around all the sort of worst people in the world, also Ukraine, to try and do this Ukraine peace deal. He went to see Putin, and Hungary currently holds the presidency of the EU, so it's quite a big deal that he's going around the world and seeing these people. He's not been given any sort of permission, as it were, to do this by the EU, and the EU are saying this isn't an official EU thing. He visited Putin, he visited Xi in China this week, and he's trying to make out that I'm the only person who can speak to all of these different people. But it's clearly just a very cynical move from him to keep those relationships going. Say to Putin, I'm on your side, and say to Xi, I can make these connections work. So, and then we had this horrible news of the attack in Ukraine, in Kyiv today, on the children's hospital of all places. So it sort of underscores how little respect Russia has for any potential peace deal and how he is making obviously no impact.
Yeah. Alex.
Oh.
You can do it. Come on, you can do it. Eyes on the prize.
My hero is election adjacent, but I wanted to give a shout out to Thangam Debonair because I thought her reaction to losing her seat, the good grace and warmth with which she wished the Green Party co-leader, well done, and said she's delighted that Bristol is still going to be represented by a progressive, and, getting through that personal hurt of losing your seat to say, do you know what? Well done. I hope you do fantastic work. I'm pleased that if I lost somebody, it's you. That to me is just a completely different world to the one we've been living in for the last 15 years.
Quite a sharp contrast with not just Liz Truss, but say Johnny Mercer.
Yeah.
The graceless.
I'd forgotten he'd lost.
He'd
Thank
lost.
you.
Okay, a little smile came on Marie's face there.
He lost. And they didn't show it on any of the coverage. I had to go and find it in some... Seriously, I had to go and find it in some Facebook group.
Just go meet a man in a
give
pub.
a concession speech.
Of course he didn't.
You'll be surprised to know he just walked off stage.
Who's your villain?
My villain is the Barcelona Neighborhood Assembly for Tourism Degrowth.
Okay.
who are campaigning, fair enough, complaining about too much tourism in Barcelona, that, brings billions of pounds to that municipality, but they're saying it's not evenly distributed, and people have to deal with the sort of, the traffic and I get all that stuff, but what they've taken to doing now is sort of squirting tourists with water guns, and so
Really loves this.
yeah,
It should be gazpacho.
Sure, but actually,
No, it's bad. To be clear, it's bad.
disgusting because it's not the fault of the person that is there on a weekend break and is having lunch with their family to be drenched.
Well, I was squirted with a water pistol at Glastonbury last week, and it was delightful because it was very hot. But no, I can see your point.
No,
Are we sure it's water?
Tourists bring an enormous amount of money to those areas, and Barcelona is a place that has developed on that kind of money. And to say now, okay, enough now, we're rich enough now, so you can fuck off.
Yeah.
It seems to me a fundamentally villainous thing to be doing to some family trying to have lunch on a
But it's the wrong
table.
target, isn't it? It's the
Yeah.
target.
Yeah,
should be
it is. They should be demanding of their government and their municipality to be doing a better job of coping with the numbers or to limit the numbers. It's not
Okay.
up to tourists to say, we won't go there.
Victor Orban, water pistol. It's very difficult, this one, Marie.
Yeah, if I had chosen Viktor Orban and he had chosen the water pistols, he would say, as he has said many weeks, he would say, Viktor Orban will be a villain any given week. So I'm going to give it to the water pistols, right?
Marie,
You have all heard this.
Who's your nomination in this special pleading here?
God, so my hero of the week, I'm going to try and practice my incredibly rusty Spanish, is Edmundo González Urrutia, who is standing against Maduro in Venezuela and currently ahead in the polls. So, I mean, God knows what will happen, when the country does actually vote. But we could be seeing the end of 25 years of Chavismo in Venezuela, which I think would be very good. He seems to be moderate and not mad and not, kind of madly authoritarian, which is very good. Also, I read a profile of him that described him as a bird-loving granddad. And I was like, okay, well, I'm rooting for him now.
Bird-loving granddad. That could mean a lot of things.
Yes. God, yeah, love tits. That was an easy one. Come on.
Oh, yes.
And so my villain is, I'm sorry to say, very similar to Matt's, actually. It is Narendra Modi, because he is currently in Russia visiting Putin. And I was about to say, literally in my notes, on the day Russia bombed the children's hospital in Kiev. But yeah, so I think Modi just, specifically for visiting Putin. But also I think India is one of those areas which the Starmer government will probably have to deal with. I think that the way Modi is governing India is, I think, very worrying. A lot of the anti-Islam sentiment and the kind of Hindutva stuff in India is very concerning. So yes, just Modi specifically and also in general.
Well, you know what? Victor Orban and Narendra Modi could be villains at any time of the week. But I think the real villain this week is the Spanish character with the water pistol. The municipality is feeling and they're behaving disgracefully. And I also think that there are a lot of great heroes around here. But I think we should be thinking a lot about Thangam Debonair, who is so classy.
I get a double!
You get a double selector there. Thangam Debonair, we love her. I think she'll be back, actually. She would have a fantastic culture secretary.
Surely she's going to the Lords, right?
I would like to see her in the Commons. Whoa, she's halfway there.
I think she's young
Thangam
enough
Debonair.
to
Yeah,
be
definitely.
up for a by-election.
Yeah, get her in.
The Lords.
You wait ages for a political bombshell and then two come along at once. The expected victory of the far-right Rassemblement National, sorry Marie, in France, did not happen on Sunday to the disbelief of pundits Anne-Marine Le Pen and her presentable young Prime Minister-in-waiting, Jordan Bardella. Veteran leftist Jean-Luc Mélenchon's alliance of his radical France Unbowed party, plus Greens, Socialists, Communists and Trotskyists, came first. Emmanuel Macron's centrists came second and the hard right a humiliating third. They'd led in the first round and they thought they were on to form a government. Mélenchon has demanded that the new Popular Front should govern, but there's a hung parliament and a summer of acrimony beckons. Marie, every time we ask you about France, you say, I haven't lived there in years, leave me alone, but tough. This one's on you. You are elated, obviously. We've discussed this. Did you enjoy watching all the very well-scrubbed Rassemblement National kids just deflate live on TV, like Ralph Wiggum?
So there was a very specific video. I think BFM TV, who I don't usually love, but they did this brilliant thing of they had a split screen of
I saw this. It was great.
On the one hand, the kind of like young left-wing people in the street about to celebrate, and on the other, the kind of far right, the fascists kind of looking at the telly, and the two next to each other, like people screaming and dancing in like kissing in the streets, and then just a room full of silent fascists. I watched it 7 times, and I just genuinely, I kept going back as that, one more time. I watched it again just before going to sleep, just as a little treat.
Yes. Well, you gave us your hot take about how the left has yet again saved France. Give us your expanded version, because there's a lot of nuance to this as well. It's not just bingo, left wins.
Yes and no. I think I've been quite frustrated, not naming any names, but by the British commentators who've said, "Oh, Macron has done it again, ha ha ha." What he did was insane. He had no way of knowing whether he could pull it off or not. And actually, and if you look, obviously the left massively helped, but also both Macron and lots of people in his party, including Edouard Philippe, the former prime minister, were, ni, so like neither nor. So encouraged people, if there was a face-off in the second round between the Front Populaire and the far right, to just vote for neither. The fact the far right came third was, again, I think, purely because the left managed to get together, like rally around together incredibly quickly, and people also really went to vote. This was the highest turnout in a legislative election since 1981, and actually that very nearly beat that as well. So I think, people really, really went to vote and felt very strongly. So I think, again, I don't think you can hand it to Macron in any way. I think it means that the far right is done for now, but also Le Pen is obviously not going anywhere. And also we have absolutely no idea what's going to happen next. I've been asked to write about it, and I'm like,
don't tie me down.
It's just like there's no, but as you mentioned, obviously there's a hung National Assembly, but also there's no obvious coalition to be made at all, because you've got, I don't have the exact seat numbers, but essentially
it's basically 3 blocks of roughly equal numbers.
Exactly.
Near enough.
And they don't want to work with each other.
And none of them want to work with each other.
So it's not, I think it was good news in that, it's always very nice when the fascists are losing. And also nice to see the left maybe coming back as a political force in the country in a way that it had not for a long time. On a personal note, I actually fucking love that François Hollande is back as an MP. That was really funny, like a lovely little subplot. In Doctor Who terms, I feel like it was a bit like the first Tutti Gatwa episode where Mel just kind of came back out of nowhere, and you're like, oh, you're still
call
there.
Back to the old school.
Also, I will say that Hollande during the campaign, for some reason, like there was no context on the video, but downed a pint in like 5 seconds because people asked him to, and it was like, well, legend.
Should stand over here. One of the things I was hearing this morning from, obviously, my circle is of a particular kind, was, well, don't be so cocky. Mélenchon is as out there as Corbyn. He sort of minimised and dismissed anti-Semitism as politics and mental. What do we need to know about Mélenchon?
Oh, he's awful.
Okay.
He is
Can you expand
a
on
horrible, horrible man. I can say horrible 7 times, that's longer. But no, more seriously, so if you look actually, so that the kind of left coalition first formed in the legislatives in 2022. And then in 2023, the Parti Socialiste actually left the coalition because France Unbowed, so Mélenchon's party, refused to call Hamas terrorists, I think. So it's a bit like, well, that's not great. That's not ideal. So no, he's a crank. Like Mélenchon, like, I'm entirely happy to say this and not caveat it in any way. Mélenchon is a massive fucking crank. He's had weird views as well on Russia, on Islam, on sort of everything you can think of. Like I used to describe Corbyn as like Mélenchon light. I feel like Corbyn is Ed Miliband, I would say, compared to Mélenchon.
Which is why I think if there is a result that you could possibly see emerging as a way out of this deadlock, it seems to be a sort of peeling away of socialists and Greens from that left coalition, and maybe even some Les Républicains soft centre rights to kind of get together and form some sort of function.
There's no centre-right anymore, because I feel like all the Républicains who were saying just went to Ensemble, the Macron's party. And also I think the problem is the Parti Socialiste has already said that they would not do any coalition with the centre, which again, it's a bit like, well, you're going to have to do something with someone.
Yeah.
I mean, individual people have, and then other people from the same bloc have said, we would.
Yeah.
Same with the Greens. Like one person says, never going to do a deal with with Macron centrists, and someone else says we'd talk to them. So maybe it will have to be a kind of issue by issue thing, or maybe they will have to offer them something in return.
Or you end up with the Trotskyists and the fascists in coalition somehow, something bananas.
But you do see actually a lot of people in France who used to vote for the communists now vote for the Front National. So, but briefly, so I would say one subplot that was quite interesting in the election is that actually the Parti Socialiste, who again had been entirely wiped out a few elections ago, actually gained a lot of seats in this election. They did a lot better than France Unbowed. Well, in that France Unbowed, I think just kept the seats that they had, but I think the centre left is coming back. So
they're the Ed Davies Lib Dems of France, without the surfboards.
Kinda.
Okay.
I don't
Getting
fully
the hang
hate
of
that.
this.
I don't
Getting the hang of it.
So again, as to what happens next, no
I mean,
idea.
the other thing worth pointing out is that the far right actually did even worse than it looks like from the raw numbers, because they're the party that in the first round had secured almost 40 seats, 39, in the first round, because they got over 50%.
Yeah.
So actually, if you take the first round seats out of the equation, they really stunk in the second round. They really did nothing.
Your system's fucking nuts.
No, it's not. It's not complicated. There's a first round where you vote for someone, and the second one you vote against someone.
Yep.
That sounds extremely French to me.
But that it reminds me, the more I've been learning about it more this weekend, it reminded me of watching that film Anatomy of a Fall last year, which is set in the French legal system, and it's everything. Watching it slightly disorientating because it's like a courtroom drama you're used to from the UK, but it's not quite the same. And I feel like that every time I watch French politics, I'm like, oh, I sort of get this. And then someone goes, and there's a second round, and I'm like, oh, I didn't. Oh no, I don't get that now.
Alex, are we going to have to get used to lots of the usual suspects over here saying, if we look to France, as if it's kind of, as if the two countries are interchangeable?
But there are some people who are saying, basically, Starmer is Macron. And, look, all that stuff is reductionist and silly. The one thing that you can extrapolate from it, I think, is that the hard right gets in trouble whenever they have to field a big number of candidates, because it's impossible to blow that dog whistle without attracting a certain number of dogs, and they get found out. Yes. However sophisticated Marine Le Pen's headquarters are about, refining their message and saying stuff without really saying stuff, once you're up to 650 candidates, there's going to be racist cranks and loons among them. Can I give you an example, just because it's very, very funny? Isabel, let me find her.
Isabel Oakeshott?
No. So there's basically a woman in one of the constituencies that her Facebook was like Bernard Manning level, just racist jokes all the way through. And when she was asked about it, she made a commitment to stop using racist jokes if she got elected. That was her answer. Actually, her answer was, my dentist is Muslim and my accountant is a Jew. And
sorry, what joke is this?
The punchline is
sounds like
some of my best friends are Algerian, but I will stop using racist humor if I get elected. And so it's the same phenomenon.
Oh my God, good for her. Can she still be racist now?
Yes, I was going to say now she can be as racist as she likes.
Just go for it.
Everyone's a winner.
But that's their problem.
It seems absurd, but is there anything, can Britain learn things from this? What's it telling us about the fabled march of populism, apart from the fact that, as you've just described, it tends to blow itself up now and again?
I mean, that effectively the centre, the left, the centre-right will, at some point, if the danger gets big enough and real enough, have to work together. That's the lesson.
But also that nothing's inevitable as well. I think that's been my real irritation. There's been a lot of stuff about it's definitely going to happen, or it's bound to happen. And
this is what I wanted to ask you about, Marie. That just to close out this idea, and there was the BBC caught a lot of stick for a headline about the far right's victory had been delayed, as if it's somehow inevitable that at some point France is going to go fascist. Speaking for the entire French populace, what's your take on this?
I think we're stuck in this slightly weird thing where around 35-40% of people do like the far right, but it rarely gets below that, but it rarely gets above that, and we're just kind of stuck with those people. And I think the less argument is saying, but actually, we've never tried to properly bring them back into the mainstream via not just centrism of the centre right, but with left wing kind of policies for working class people. I think that's worth a shot, but failing that, I'm not really sure.
Finally, going into a summer that's going to be incredibly complicated. With the Olympics and everything, with no government. That's very French.
It feels very Belgian of us, actually. I feel like it's the Belgians who really love not having government.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm going to the Olympics.
And the Dutch had a big
they really enjoy Mark Rutte or not having a government, and that's it. Yeah.
We'll take Mark Rutte or no government, please.
Yeah.
I'm going to the Olympics in Paris, so if it's not sorted out in the next 3 weeks,
you might end up running the country.
I'm willing to serve.
You're going to kick off, are you?
Le chef Jeffrey. And that is the end of the first podcast of this Brave New Era. It's all going to be downhill from here. Before we go, we're going to do escape routes. What are the books, films, TV, music, or miscellaneous that have been keeping our minds off politics if such a thing has been possible over the past few days? Marie?
I have been rewatching Elementary, which I genuinely think is the best TV adaptation of Sherlock Holmes. It's really good. It's American. John Watson is actually Joan Watson, is a woman played by Lucy Liu. He's played by Johnny Lee Miller. And it's just really good. It's really quite subtle and really well written, and the characters are very good. And it is just a very clever, really good, touching show with cool crimes as well. So Elementary is just very good. And I think that kind of flew under the radar a bit in Britain.
Fantastic. So. Alex?
I love Elementary, by the way.
As do I.
Absolutely love it. Yeah. So I've been reading Henry Morris's The Tories of Tragedy. It is it's utterly incredible as a piece of work. So basically, he's taken each prime minister and written an act, a Shakespeare act around them called Shakespeare, based on one of Shakespeare's tragedies or his histories. So, Liz Truss is Cleopatra in Antony and Cleopatra. That's the act. And, it's completely readable as a thing on its own, and people should buy it and read it. It's not just a play to be performed. Yeah. It's funny in its own right.
Excellent. Last chance to have fun with the Conservative Party. Yeah. Matt?
I did something which I don't often do, which is went to a sort of music event to see my brother's band, DG Solaris, who are great, and I would recommend. And also I saw another very good singer there called Holly Henderson, who's someone I've not come across before, but she's very good. Really good voice, great songs, and she's got this kind of sort of late 60s, early 70s, quite sort of slightly psychedelic, slightly sort of prog rocky kind of vibe. She describes her style as Baroque pop, and I enjoy that. I've just been getting into her album, just added it on Spotify this week. And
that sounds like my cup of tea.
Good fun.
Baroque pop.
Yeah. Well, I've got music as well. It is somebody I saw at Glastonbury who I'd really been wanting to see for a long time. She is Sofia Cortesis, and she is a Peruvian DJ. It's a very North London pontiff.
That's very you, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really into my Peruvian techno, actually. Yes, it's free-range Peruvian techno, actually. But her album's called Madres, as in mothers, and it's about the women of Peru. And it's like her, not just her own mother and her own aunties, but also folk saints. Women of very humble backgrounds who kind of tend to die at the age of 25 and then become venerated. Their houses become shrines. And she's built this record of brilliant techno around all these ideas. The videos are all sort of indigenous art, and the music is techno, and it fits into my expanding sort of subgenre of middle-aged man house music that I've been recommending on this podcast. People like Barry Can't Swim and T-shirt.
You should do an evening at the Tabernacle.
Yeah,
with just all of your recommendations.
Yes, Madras by Sofia Cortesis, really, really great, and she plays live as well. It's not just decks and headphones, and she was just so absolutely delighted to be on the Westholt stage at Glastonbury, cavorting around in what appeared to be a wedding dress and having a brilliant time. So Sofia Cortesis, I'll stick a link in the, we'll find a link for Holly Henderson as well, put them in the notes so you can have a listen. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the podcast. Thank you, Matt Green.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marie Leconte.
Thank you.
And thank you, Alex Andreou.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening, listeners. If you enjoyed our live shows last week, you might want to sign up to Patreon so that you can be the first to find out when the next ones are. No clues, but I'm particularly looking forward to one of them. So follow the link in the show notes, or search Patreon Oh God What Now to find out more. We will see you next time. Now please raise your glasses to the latest Patreon backers to join our mission-based podcast.
Many thanks for your generosity, and a big shout out to Andrew Fahy, David James, Vicky Lagden, Gregory K, Jason L, and James Bayer.
Greetings from me, and thanks for contributing to our fighting fund to Thomas Kenyon, Brian Morgan, Susan, Beige Angel, Alison McCann, and Martini.
Many thanks from me to Lee Woodall, Morris Castro, Prava, Alex, Sarah Polly, and Maggie from Kimchi.
And finally, a big hello from me to new supporter, your mum. Yes, who listens to the Oh God, What Now podcast? Your mum listens to the Oh God, What Now podcast. And welcome home, come on in and close the door to returning supporters who've re-upped their backing. Jamie Shoesmith, Tony and Jill Marsh, Alistair McKenzie, Ian Sleeman, and Stephen Brewster. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time.